So we've talked about two of the actual needs, or two of the theories of motivation, broad categories. We talked about needs and drives theory, basically this idea that there's external needs that are being provided for by an outside force, and that's what motivates people. We just finished talking about basically the intrinsic theories, which are based on the personality traits. So that what you need to know if you're wanting to motivate someone is what type of motivators motivate them. Is it internal motivation, in which case we need a situation to establish a good situation that will likely result in internal motivation resulting in performance, or are they externally motivated and we need to address those kind of needs with external rewards in order to motivate them. So we're now going to move on. We're now going to talk about the cognitive choice theories. So the assumption here is that people are active decision makers who strive to be rational in choosing what they do and how much effort to exert. In other words, the cognitive choice theories suggest that the force of motivation, what forces someone or results in someone behaving in a certain way in the workplace, is a cognitive, rational choice. I decide how much effort to exert based on the logical conclusions I get from the current situation. So these are also, not only are they rational theories, they're based on us behaving logically and rationally to the situation that we're in. So they're also situational models. They basically suggest set up a situation in an organization which results in someone recognizing that the rational choice is to perform, and then they will. So the two main ones we're going to talk about is equity theory and expectancy theory. And they're slightly different, but both of them are about setting up a situation in a work setting that results in people making the logical choice to be motivated and to perform. So equity theory is by Adams, and it's basically the idea that people's perceptions about the fairness of their treatment at work affect their motivation. So it's about basically reducing inequity, and it's looking at the inputs and outcomes. So basically what it suggests is that if your amount of outcomes compared to your amount of inputs is equal to other people's, you have equity. So this theory is about basically the perception of how fair each person's inputs to output ratio is. So notice in the yellow box under equity, we have I at the bottom. That's inputs, how much effort you're putting in. And at the top, we have outputs. That's how much outputs that you're getting. In other words, the outcomes, I'm sorry, not outputs, outcomes. So basically, inputs might be I work 40 hours a week. Outcomes might be I make $800 a week. So if your input of 40 hours to your output or your outcome of $800 is the same as other people doing the same work, everyone else at my work also puts in 40 hours a week, and everyone else also gets $800 in outcomes. That would be an equity, and in that situation, most people would be motivated to continue to work. There is equity. Now, there's a couple of things you can do if there's inequity. The problem here is that the inequity can also be perceptual. So for instance, if you're making $800 a week and you work 40 hours, and someone else makes $1,000 a week, and you think they work 40 hours, but in reality they come in every Sunday, and that's why they're making more money, you will perceive it as an inequitable situation. You think they're putting in as much inputs as you, but they're getting more outputs. You feel slighted. You're going to be less motivated. So as far as a theory, the general idea behind equity theory is that there's three things we can change. That if there's a problem in an organization, if there's a problem with motivation, the first thing we want to look for is there perceived inequity? And if there is, there's a couple of things we can change. We can change the inputs, so we can adjust how much people are putting into it. And this is one of the areas that people can do it as well. So, for instance, if I think someone's making $200 more an hour or $200 more a week than I am for the same amount of work, what would I do if I know I can't get a raise? I'm going to still be making that $100. I might decide to lower my own inputs. In other words, I become less motivated in order for me to actually make equity again. Okay, yeah, he makes more than I do, but I'm also working less now. I put less time in. I spend more time every day on Facebook instead of working. So that's something that the employees can also make changes in this. You can also change the outcomes. So this is something more managers might do sometimes, but you can actually change So example, you might notice an equity and realize, oh, some people are underperforming, but I'm also not paying them as much. Maybe I should increase their outcomes. Or you could alter perception. So making sure everyone's aware of why certain people are making more money. And that gets into the ideas of kind of organizational justice and fairness. So this theory is about basically creating this idea of equity. And it's a perception of equity. And when there's a perception of equity, that people are getting an appropriate amount of outcomes for their inputs, and people are getting equal treatment fairly based on their inputs and their outcomes, that's when you're going to find the most motivation and the best productivity. Now, this theory also suggests that one of the things that can actually motivate someone is if their outcomes are actually greater than their inputs. So in other words, if someone knows that they're putting in just the same as everyone else, and suddenly you're paying them more, that they would naturally be inclined to change their inputs to justify that extra cost. This is where equity theory kind of falls apart, because again, equity theory is based on the idea that we're rational, logical decision makers. Generally, we find some support for equity theory when we apply it to organizations and put it to the test. But usually we don't find it. If you overpay someone, it usually does not result in them working more. It usually results in them being pretty happy about it and everyone else working less because they perceive the unfairness. So newer concepts grounded in equity theory include equity sensitivity, the idea of some people are much more worried about equity than others. Organizational justice, so the idea is that equity theory is getting at this idea of how do you perceive the justice in your organization. And we're going to talk about organizational justice when we talk more about job attitudes. But organizational justice includes distributive justice, so the feeling or perception that everyone is being given the appropriate amount of outcome for their inputs. Procedural justice, the understanding of why people are being paid the way they are, and also interactional justice, how people are communicated to about these decisions. So beyond equity theory, we now move on to expectancy theory by Vroom. Basically, expectancy theory is even more focusing kind of on the perceptions that are occurring in organizations. So behaviors result from conscious choices amongst alternatives, which are evaluated on V, I, and E. So basically, this is an idea that basically the V, I, and E are somewhat under the control of the organization. And adjusting V, I, and E can result in increasing or decreasing motivation because people should make rational, logical decisions about how motivated they should be, how much effort they put in, based on V, I, and E. So V is valence, I is instrumentality, and E is expectancy. So valence is the value of the expected level of satisfaction to be derived from some outcome. So valence can change from person to person, but basically valence is how much do I value the outcome? If the outcome is a paycheck each week, how much do I value that paycheck? If the outcome is praise and Employee of the Week award, how much does the person actually value that outcome? If the outcome is a raise or a promotion, again, how much is it valued? Because if it's valued at 0, you're not going to get any motivation out of it. Instrumentality is the perceived relationship between performance and the likelihood of that outcome. So again, if someone has an outcome that they like, I want a raise. I value a raise greatly. That raise has value to me. It's got a number attached to it. But my instrumentality is I don't perceive that there is any relationship between increasing or decreasing my performance and getting a raise. Raises in this company are based solely on whether you're liked or not on your performance, or maybe it is even raises are based on if you're related to the owner. In that case, the instrumentality would be 0. I perceive no relationship between my performance and the likelihood of this valued outcome. If I do think there's a relationship between the performance and the outcome, then this is going to be, again, a positive number. And finally, expectancy, the individual belief about the likelihood of achieving a desired performance level. So, for example, I might say I would value a promotion greatly. I believe that if I perform at a higher level, I would get that promotion. But that performance at a higher level would be increasing my sales by 20%. Expectancy then. Expectancy is I have no new clients, and the clients I have, I'm already hitting for all the business I can. There is no way I could get a 20% increase in performance. So though, yes, performance is related to the outcome, yes, the outcome has value, my expectancy is, though, that no matter how hard I worked, I couldn't make that desired performance level, and in that case, expectancy would be 0. Now, the reason I keep putting values to this is it's not necessarily that you sit down and actually do a mathematical equation, but the idea behind expectancy theory is that motivation is a multiplicative function. Whenever you multiply anything by 0, the result is 0. And that's the idea that if any one of these is at 0, you can't have motivation. So no matter how much you value something and no matter how much you think performance is related to that outcome, if you don't think you can make that performance, expectancy is 0, no motivation. If you think performance is related to the outcome and you think you could do that performance, but you don't value the reward, again, you're not going to be motivated. And finally, if you value the reward and you believe that you could attain greater performance, but you don't think performance is related to the outcome, instrumentality, again, no motivation. So now we're going to talk about self-regulation theories. Self-regulation theories are kind of the top of the pyramid. They're talking about when people are self-motivating. Again, these are fairly intrinsic theories. Motivation is directly linked to the manner in which individuals monitor their own behaviors and make adjustments in their pursuit of goals. So self-regulation theories are mainly focused on particular types of people and particular types of jobs. Think of self-regulation theories as kind of going on top of, you already have designed a job which allows someone to self-motivate. You've already set up a situation where they're basically at the higher level of needs. They're at the developmental level. And they're fairly intrinsically motivated. In that case, that's where these self-regulation theories are going to really kind of play out. Goal-setting theory, the social cognitive theory, and control theory are the three that we're going to talk about specifically. So these are very theory Y type theories. The first one we're going to talk about is Locke's goal-setting theory. According to Locke, goals affect behavior in 4 ways. Setting a goal directs attention on a particular task, mobilizes on-task efforts, enables us to be persistent. Now, notice those first 3 right off the bat were, again, very similar to Campbell's 3 components of performance: task, effort, and maintenance. And it facilitates strategies that can be used at a higher cognitive level to move towards goal attainment. So the idea here is that one of the best ways to motivate someone is to set goals. That when there is a goal, that directs our attention to complete that goal. So that's directing our effort. That it mobilizes on-task effort. So we're going to work harder on anything that's going to get us to that goal. It allows us to stay persistent because now we have a goal we're trying to attain. And that we're going to use different strategies to try to make sure that we get to that goal attainment. And that's more of that consistency of effort or maintenance. So motivation is enhanced when employees accept and are committed to specific, difficult goals, and when feedback about progress towards those goals is provided. So, goal theory has 3 big components that are just on this slide. The first one is that we set a goal. And that goal, by its very nature, is going to start motivating someone. But the type of goal is important. We need to make sure that the employees accept and are committed to that goal. So, in other words, there has to be an acceptance that this is a good goal. I like this goal. I want this goal. It needs to be a relatively difficult goal, and it's a moderately difficult goal that works the best. So a very easy goal tends not to motivate people because it's too easy. An impossible goal tends not to really motivate people either, as they don't think they can attain it. And in a way, goal theory is kind of building a little bit on that Vroom's VIE theory. So again, valence, instrumentality, and expectancy. If you don't think you could ever attain the goal, then the goal's not going to have an effect on you. Goals work when we think they're attainable, we value the goal, and we can see how our performance is going to get us to that goal. And finally, we need to be getting feedback, which keeps us persistent and allows us to change the strategies to make sure we attain that goal. So this is the model of goal theory. And there's a fair amount of stuff going on in this theory that I want to walk you through, and all the elements are here. So the first one is goal commitment and goal acceptance. So the far left. So the start of goal theory is that the goal has to be committed on and accepted by the person that's taking on this goal. In other words, the first part of goal theory is you need to make sure that you are establishing goals that people are going to be committed to, that they're going to accept. Once we have a committed and accepted goal, that is going to result in the direction, intensity, persistence, and strategies. Those 4 points we talked about in the last slide. That having those goals is going to direct activity. It's going to increase the intensity of that activity. That activity is going to be persistent, and we're going to adjust our strategies to make sure we get to our goal. Now, once that energy, that's the force of motivation, that direction, intensity, persistence, and strategies. Now, how it translates to performance, there's a couple of additional factors, the blue boxes. First, how specific is that goal, and that really is talking about goal specificity. Is it a relatively moderate goal or difficult goal to obtain, and is it clear what the goal is and how to get to it? The more specific the goal is, the more clear how the goal can be attained, and the more moderately difficult the goal is, the more likely, according to goal theory, that direction, intensity, persistence, and strategy will result in increased performance. Ability is another factor. So again, this is an acknowledgement that you can highly motivate someone, but if they just don't have the ability to do what is necessary to get to the goal, it's not going to help. It all falls apart. But if you have a specific, moderately difficult goal, and the person has the ability, and they're motivated by the goal commitment and goal acceptance, you're going to see performance. And that performance then maps on to knowledge of results. So as the performance moves the person closer and closer to the goal, are they finding out about their knowledge of that performance? Are they getting knowledge of the results? And that's the feedback loop, the final part of this. And the feedback loop mainly works to further energize direction, intensity, persistence, and possible changes of strategies. So let's just go through a quick example. You decide that you want to get an A on a test. So it's the third time you're taking a test in a class. The previous 2 times you haven't done very well, so you set a moderately difficult goal. I want to get an A on this test. You commit to the goal, you accept the goal. So this is now going to provide motivation, direction, intensity, persistence, and strategy. So you may come up with a strategy. I'm going to study an extra hour every day prior to the test. And I'm going to test myself occasionally. I'm going to direct my efforts. I'm going to make sure I make all the classes. So the goal is fairly specific at this point. It is to get a 90 or above on the test, and it's pretty clear what you need to do. You need to make sure you don't miss any classes. You need to make sure you're understanding the material. You need to study more. You have the ability to do this. So you start working on this. You start studying. Now, knowledge of results would mean that you should also be maybe testing yourself, so getting practice tests or practice quizzes to see, am I understanding the material? If you find yourself, every time I test myself, I get 10 out of 10, then that knowledge result says the current direction, intensity, persistence, and strategy, the feedback loop is sufficient. Let's keep doing that. That's going to get me to my goal. However, if you find attending class and studying for 1 extra hour a day is resulting in you still getting 7 out of 10, the knowledge of the results can now feedback to say maybe you need to do an hour and a half, maybe you need to change strategies, maybe instead of studying alone, you need to find a partner to study with, so you change how you're trying to get to the goal. This is the idea behind goal theory. Now notice, a lot of this is about intrinsic self-motivation, but setting up a situation that allows it to happen. So from a management viewpoint, a manager is mainly going to be focusing on the start of this model, goal commitment and goal acceptance. They're going to focus on goal specificity and then providing the feedback loop. So let's talk about the social cognitive theory. Emphasizes cognitive, behavioral, and individual and environmental factors that work together in determining motivation. So there's basically 3 components of self-regulation according to the social cognitive theories, and most of this is coming out of Alfred Bandura's work. There's self-observation, self-evaluation, and self-reaction. So that basically what motivates us, again, intrinsically motivates us, is self-observation, the extent to which we pay attention to specific aspects of our behavior. In other words, are we watching our own behavior as how it relates to our goals or our performance? Then there's self-evaluation. If we're observing those behaviors, what is the attention that individual devotes to the feedback process of how well are we doing? And finally, what is our internal response to that self-evaluation? Self-reactions. So this is basically a theory of self-efficacy. The idea that the more we feel that we are working towards our goals, that we can see that our behavior is resulting in the goals, that we evaluate our process, and that makes us feel good, the self-reactions, that's basically self-esteem and self-efficacy. Self-efficacy, that we believe we're capable of doing it, that's the self-observation and self-evaluation. And the self-reaction is our self-esteem. So kind of taking social cognitive theories all the way back to the needs theories we talked about, this is a theory about that kind of idea that self-esteem was the fourth of the 5 layers in Maslow's need hierarchy. This is a theory kind of focused on that idea of making sure that people feel good about themselves because they're being successful at their work will result in them being more motivated. Control theory is Carver and Shearer in 1998. It's the importance of gathering and receiving and interpreting feedback. So this is a theory that basically says that one of the important parts of motivation is simply the feedback that we're getting. There's basically a negative feedback loop, comparison of performance feedback with goals or standards, and we seek to reduce this discrepancy. So the idea behind this is that this is kind of like the room thermostat version of motivation. The idea that, think about a room thermostat. It basically is sitting there going, is it 72 degrees? It is 72 degrees. Okay, nothing needs to change. Is it 72 degrees? Yes, it's 72 degrees. Cool. Nothing needs to change. Is it 72 degrees? Oh, it's 69 degrees. Uh-oh. Turn on the heater till it becomes 72 degrees. Is it 72 yet? Is it 72 yet? Is it 72 yet? Oh, it's 72. Don't need to do anything again. That's the idea behind control theory. The idea is that at the bottom, we're doing our behaviors, looking at the feedback. So at the whole time, we're basically going, here's what I'm doing, and is it working? Here's what I'm doing, is it working? And at the same time, we're comparing it to what is the standard of expectation? What is the standard of expectation? So basically, this theory suggests that managers and organizations want to set a standard, and that people will then behave in a way to get them to that standard. And if they're below the standard, they are going to be motivated to change their behavior to get to the standard. But once they're at the standard, there's no longer a motivation to change. They're going to then kind of go into a status quo mode. So this is the idea of just seeking to reduce the discrepancy between the two. Now, each one of these theories that we've been talking about, you can kind of see works in some situations and doesn't in others. So control theory is very much about basically what motivates people to get to a certain level of standard within an organization. And there is some empirical research that this does actually result in certain motivation in some types of jobs. The previous theory that we were talking about, basically Bandura's social cognitive theories, is about what happens when you have a very intrinsically motivated person that is in a job that allows a lot of self-esteem, and that's the level they're functioning on. In other words, what drives them is self-esteem goals. Control theory is what's driving someone is trying to meet a standard of expectation within the organization. So each one of these theories has some support in the organizations, in some jobs, with some people. So the applications of motivational theories to organizational problems. Organizational behavioral management, OBM, is the idea of coming up with ways to reward desired behaviors. And if hopefully one thing you've gathered from this lecture so far is we've covered a lot of different theories. We've covered theories that focus on extrinsic motivation, external motivators. We've covered theories that talk about intrinsic motivation. We've talked about theories that are driven by setting goals. We've talked about theories that are driven by a need for self-esteem. We've talked about theories that are based on rational decision making. And we've talked about theories that are based on more kind of broad, just matching the goals of the expectations of the organization. So if we're actually using these theories, a part of this is, again, that big phrase in IO psychology, it depends. When you're trying to motivate someone, you need to ask a lot of questions. Are they acting rationally? Are they intrinsically or extrinsically motivated? What controls and what can I change in this organization? Can I redesign the job? Can I redesign the reward systems? What is most likely to work? And the idea here of organizational behavioral management is the process of applying most, if not all, of these theories to try to come up with a system that matches the current environment and job that you have been asked to motivate. So it's often referred to also, another idea behind this is goal setting and management by objective. So organizational behavioral management, OBM, is about rewarding desired behaviors, and it's often kind of based on kind of a B.F. Skinner look at basically providing direct rewards for behaviors you want to see increased. So basically, an example of an OBM is a logging company. So there was a logging company, and this was actually a published study that used organizational behavioral management. And their problem was that they had to bust the workers in to actually do their job. And anytime someone was late, it made the entire team late, which meant lost money and revenue. And if the team left early and basically just left with less people, again, the company lost money. So an organizational psychologist came in and designed an organizational behavioral management system. So every day, 5 days a week, when you came in and got to the bus on time, you got a poker card. And at the end of the week, the best hand of the person that got 5 cards got a $100 bonus. So absentee and lateness was a lot more expensive than that $100 and generally disappeared. So the company every week was losing way over $100 and either lost resources because the entire team was late, so it worked less hours, or lost resources because employees didn't show up to do their job. Now, with this simple adjustment of rewarding the desired behavior, being at the bus on time, that $100 cost, which resulted in no absenteeism on a regular basis, was much cheaper than the money the organization was losing by losing people due to absenteeism. MBO, again, management by objective, is basically goal-setting theory applied continuously to an organization. It's basically, again, kind of an organizational development application of setting reasonable goals and providing the feedback to allow motivation. And job enrichment is the process of increasing motivational potential of jobs by strengthening the key motivational characteristics using job characteristics theory. So the idea of job enrichment is look at a job and can you add skill variety? Can you add task identity? Can you add task significance, autonomy, and feedback? And if so, you've enriched that job, which means most people will be more motivated. Now, every one of these, though, has some problems with it. So organizational behavioral management is basically providing external rewards into a situation that if people are already intrinsically motivated, they may actually end up being now externally motivated. And if you take away the rewards, their behavior will go down. Goal setting and management by objectives, again, the goals themselves have to be valued for this to work. And with job enrichment, again, if you have people that are just coming in based on external rewards, all I'm here for is a paycheck, and suddenly you start making their job more varied and trying to spend time convincing them of the importance of their job and giving them more choices and feedback, they're probably going to react negatively to that because they don't want to have an enriched job. They just want to get their job over with. So bringing all of this together is applied behavioral analysis. And again, this is just another way to try to motivate people based on all these theories. And it's the ABC model: antecedents, behaviors, and consequences. Antecedents are what increases or decreases behaviors. What are the behaviors? And then what are the consequences of the behaviors? And there's 5 steps to behavioral management of human resources. Behaviors needing changed or targeted. So the first thing you want to determine if you're using applied behavioral analysis in an organization is what are the behaviors that you want to see changed. The targeted behaviors are then measured to determine the baseline. So if you're wanting to reduce absenteeism, what is absenteeism at right now? If you're wanting to reduce negative safety behaviors, how many negative safety behaviors are occurring in a week? You then want to look for links between the current rewards and punishments and the behaviors. So what is attached to those behaviors? Is there a way to reward those behaviors? Is there a way to punish those behaviors? Organizations then intervenes with a program that sets the goals and links rewards to those goal attainment. And then once you've got it in place, evaluation phase. Notice that the ABC model, Applied Behavioral Analysis, has a lot of components that we've already been talking about. So again, it's a behavioral approach. We're providing external rewards and punishments. It is also following a very systematic structure. When we were talking about organizational development, we talked about Levin's model of change, that you had to first unfreeze, then you had to move, and then you had to refreeze. So the unfreezing is the process of figuring out what behaviors need to be changed. The moving process is we're targeting those behaviors with rewards and punishment. And the refreezing is the evaluation phase. Once we've instituted the change, is it actually working? So again, organizational behavioral management in this case is relying on this idea of applied behavioral analysis, the application of principles of behavioral psychology to control individual and group behavior. And there's also goal setting and management by objectives. So again, MBO is a practical application of goal setting, performance objectives involving two factors: systems for establishing work-related goals, procedures for assessing a person's performance as compared to those goals. So again, when we're looking broadly at the different types of applying motivational theories to problems, organizational behavioral management, OBM, is simply about rewarding desired behaviors. And it's using the applied behavioral analysis model, the ABCs, that we talked about in the last slide. Goal setting by management, by objectives, MBO, is again a practical application of goal setting theory. We're simply establishing a system for establishing those moderately effective or moderately difficult work-related goals, and then a procedure for assessing the person's performance as compared to those goals. Usually it has 4 steps. And those 4 steps are that managers and subordinates jointly set an objective for those subordinates. Subordinates then develop an action plan, self-motivate, come up with strategies to achieve those goals. The manager then conducts a performance review at various times to examine the progress to those goals, and then a participative setting for objectives for the next period. So once the objectives are attained, the cycle starts over again. And this is again an example of how organizations will often incorporate these theories into actual practice.